There is this incredibly specific, quiet anxiety happening in offices and living rooms right now.
Oh, absolutely.
It is this visceral, emotional feeling that just catches you completely off guard. You sit at your laptop, you type a short prompt into a text box, and you watch a software program write a complex, nuanced email in 2 seconds.
Right. Or it generates a fully functional piece of code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or it flawlessly summarizes an hour-long, highly contentious meeting you just sat through. And in those 2 seconds, as you watch the cursor blink, you feel this chill.
I know exactly what you mean.
Because it is no longer just an abstract economic theory discussed in lecture halls. It touches on your personal identity, your stability, and that fundamental human need to feel useful. Welcome to TalkKast, by the way. I really think we need to confront the reality of that feeling today.
We do, because that anxiety is rooted in something very profound. I mean, work is not merely a transaction where you trade your physical or mental labor for currency.
Right, it's much more than that.
It is the primary structure by way of which you organize your time. It is the narrative you use to explain yourself to your friends, your family, your community.
It is how you introduce yourself at a party.
Exactly. It is the foundation upon which you imagine your future. So when that foundation feels like it is shifting beneath your feet, the fear is deeply emotional. It is not just logistical.
That makes total sense.
The core mission of our conversation today really has to be moving past that simple, panic-inducing question of whether machines will take your job. Because that framing is a trap.
A trap? Tell me more about that.
Well, it makes you think in binary terms. You either have a job or you don't. We need to ask a much more accurate and practical question, which is, which specific parts of your daily work are being absorbed, and what happens to the balance of your day, your energy, and your value when they are?
Okay, let's unpack this, because the way most of us visualize this shift seems entirely flawed from the ground up.
Completely flawed.
We're using outdated mental models to understand a completely novel situation.
The biggest misunderstanding happening right now is that people visualize automation as a clean, one-to-one swap.
Like a literal replacement.
Right. They picture a boardroom where a hiring manager is literally swapping out one human worker for one piece of software, almost like trading players on a sports team.
Which is terrifying, obviously.
But real workplaces, real economies, they just do not function with that kind of blunt simplicity. Jobs are not singular, indivisible objects. Jobs are complex bundles of tasks.
Bundles of tasks. That is a useful way to look at it.
It is the only way to look at it. When we look at the global workforce, we see that around 1 in 4 jobs is exposed to generative artificial intelligence. But the internal transformation of the role is far more likely than total replacement of the human.
That makes sense when you actually sit down and break a job title apart. I mean, the title on the business card is just a shorthand.
Exactly.
It is a massive, messy collection of different actions, decisions, and interactions.
Consider a marketing manager, for instance. The verb marketing does not adequately describe their Tuesday.
No, definitely not.
They do not just market, they persuade reluctant internal stakeholders to approve a budget. They manage profound uncertainty when a campaign launches into an unpredictable consumer environment.
They put out fires all day.
Right. They write copy, they analyze sudden data trends, they navigate the egos of different team members, and they coordinate across completely different departments.
It is incredibly highly contextual.
Or think about a clinical nurse. A nurse does not just walk into a room and record blood pressure and heart rate on a chart.
That is just one tiny piece of the bundle.
Exactly. They assess the patient's underlying emotional state. They comfort terrified families. They prioritize a sudden influx of emergencies.
They notice the subtle things.
Right. They notice when the color of a patient's skin or the energy in the room simply feels wrong, even if the monitors are not beeping yet. The software might excel at one highly specific task within that bundle.
Like charting the vitals.
Like charting the vitals, pulling the data trends, drafting the initial campaign brief. But it is structurally incapable of performing the entire interconnected job.
Right. It can execute the micro-level output, but it cannot navigate the macro-level environment.
Precisely.
Let's look at the front desk of any busy corporate office, like a receptionist.
The receptionist is a perfect lens for this.
The software sitting on that receptionist's computer can easily handle the highly predictable, structured tasks in that daily bundle.
Sure, the routine stuff.
It can manage basic calendar scheduling, it can send out standard email replies about parking, and it can route simple information requests to the right department.
It does that instantly.
But the human being sitting in that chair is doing something completely different. They are handling the awkward, unscripted interactions.
The messy human stuff.
Exactly. They spot the hesitation or confusion in a delivery driver's face when they walk through the door. They manage the nuanced, unpredictable social dynamics when two rival executives happen to be in the lobby at the exact same time.
Right, an algorithm cannot read the tension in a room.
The role itself does not vanish unless a business makes the radical decision that those subtle human interactions hold absolute zero value.
And that is the crucial distinction. It is a slow, uneven process. Some tasks will disappear entirely.
The parking emails, for example.
Yes, some will speed up to the point where they take seconds instead of hours, and some tasks, often the ones we previously undervalued, will actually become much more valuable precisely because the routine, mechanical things around them have been automated.
It is like looking at a recipe, or rather a professional kitchen. The software might chop the onions perfectly,
And fast.
incredibly fast, with zero waste. But the software does not know how to conceptualize and cook the entire meal.
Right.
It does not know the culinary narrative the restaurant is trying to tell, and it certainly cannot taste the sauce to see if it needs more salt or acidity.
It has no palate.
But wait, if the machine is chopping all the onions, doing all that prep work, do we still need as many sous chefs in the kitchen? The volume of human labor required to produce the same meal has to drop.
That is true. The kitchen dynamic changes completely. The bottleneck shifts.
What do you mean by the bottleneck shifts?
Well, you might not need 5 people chopping onions, but you might suddenly have the capacity to serve 3 times as many tables.
Because the prep is done instantly.
Exactly. Which means you need more expediters, more people tasting, more people designing the menu. But the anxiety you're pointing to is real.
It is very real for the person chopping the onions.
Right. Certain types of work are undeniably shrinking. This requires us to identify exactly which onions are being chopped across the wider economy.
In other words, which specific daily tasks are the most vulnerable?
Yes, which tasks are the most vulnerable to being absorbed by a neural network?
Let's examine the traits of those vulnerable tasks, because for a very long time, there was a profound illusion of safety in white-collar, desk-based work.
A massive illusion.
We thought we were immune.
We lived under a massive illusion of safety. The tasks most at risk today share very specific, highly identifiable traits.
What are they?
They are structured, they are repetitive, they are primarily screen-based, they are easy to digitize into text or code, and they rely heavily on recognizing patterns from large volumes of historical examples.
Which points directly at clerical, administrative, and even entry-level analytical roles.
Exactly. Data entry, routine bookkeeping, basic customer service scripts, templated internal reporting, standard legal document review.
The bread and butter of the corporate office.
These have the highest exposure levels. And the mechanism here is what really matters. Vulnerability is not about how smart a job is or how much education it took to get the role.
It is not a status thing.
It is not about human intelligence or corporate status at all. It is entirely about whether the underlying task is routine and predictable.
I see.
If a workflow in your day can be accurately mapped out as, take this input, follow these explicit rules, and output this predictable result, it's highly susceptible to automation.
That makes total sense.
Digital ecosystems are constantly reorganizing themselves around frictionless inputs.
I remember that. And that explains why this feels like such a shock to the system for so many office workers.
It was completely unexpected for them.
For decades, we pictured automation as a robot on a factory floor. A massive, physical robot welding car parts.
Right. Blue-collar automation.
We built this elaborate societal fortress made of college degrees, specialized certifications, and complex spreadsheets. We assumed that our knowledge work was entirely safe behind those walls because it required a brain, not just hands.
But the software didn't need hands.
Exactly. The software just walked right through the front door, through our Wi-Fi routers, straight into our laptops and our inboxes.
White-collar workers are no longer watching the disruption from a safe academic distance. They are living inside of it.
Every single day.
People who confidently assumed their work was too specialized, too cognitive, or too professional to automate are discovering that their daily digital workflows are actually perfectly suited for this technology.
Because it is all just pattern recognition.
Yes. Large language models operate by predicting the next statistically likely word or token based on massive training data.
Right.
If your job involves producing highly predictable text, code, or data summaries, you are essentially doing manual statistical prediction. The old comfort blanket of office work safety has become incredibly thin.
Since the fortress has been breached and the technology is already sitting on our desks, we need to look at what is actually happening to the people inside.
The people doing the work.
Right. If their jobs do not disappear overnight, how exactly do they change shape?
They change shape through the rise of what I call the first draft economy.
The first draft economy. That is an interesting phrase.
Entire professions are being deeply altered by AI taking over the very first pass of the cognitive labor.
Like writing the rough draft.
It writes the rough draft of the corporate memo. It generates the initial block of code based on a prompt. It builds the foundational skeleton of a 50-slide presentation deck.
The blank page grunt work.
Exactly. It does the blank page grunt work, and it leaves the human worker to review, correct, combine, synthesize, and ultimately make the final judgment call.
We're seeing this shift happen in real time across incredibly complex industries.
Absolutely everywhere.
In software development, for example, studies are showing that developers using advanced coding assistants are finishing their programming tasks over 55% faster.
Which is an astronomical jump in productivity.
It is not a marginal improvement. That is a staggering fundamental change in the speed of production.
The increase in speed is massive. And look at the mechanism in customer service. Klarna introduced an AI assistant that successfully handled 2/3 of all their customer service chats globally within a single month.
2/3.
2/3. That single invisible software system was doing the equivalent daily labor of 700 full-time human agents. It handled the refunds, the standard inquiries, the lost shipments.
Even in fields we consider deeply human, like teaching and healthcare, the shape of the day is changing.
Very much so.
The software generates the multiple choice quizzes, or it listens to the patient consultation and perfectly summarizes the complex medical notes.
Leaving the human to do the human part.
Right. Meanwhile, the human teacher, or the human doctor, is supposedly freed up to focus on the pacing of the lesson, the bedside empathy, the ethical judgments, and reading the emotional state of the room.
What's fascinating here is that jobs do not announce they are leaving. There is no dramatic exit interview for a task.
It just quietly fades away.
Instead, small, invisible parts of your day simply vanish. A 1-hour drafting session becomes 15 minutes.
Right.
The role of the meeting note-taker, which has been a staple of corporate life for decades, entirely evaporates because the software transcribes and summarizes it perfectly while everyone just talks.
I understand the efficiency argument. I really do. And on paper, freeing people up to do higher-level thinking sounds ideal. But I have a major concern here, especially regarding the life cycle of a career for younger workers.
Entry-level problem.
Yes. If the software does all the simple first drafts, how does a junior employee ever learn the ropes to become a senior employee?
That is the million-dollar question.
You used to learn by handling those simple tickets. You learned by doing the repetitive research, by writing those terrible first drafts, and having a senior person correct you over and over.
You built your intuition that way.
Exactly. You built your internal database of knowledge through repetition. If those starter tasks are completely gone, the professional ladder loses its bottom rungs. How do you climb a ladder with no bottom rungs?
That loss of the learning layer and the sudden disappearance of daily tasks is exactly what is driving the current wave of workplace panic.
It has to be.
The mechanism of learning requires friction. It requires struggle. When you write a bad first draft, you are forced to organize your thoughts, confront your own lack of understanding, and slowly piece together a logical argument.
You have to actually think through the problem.
Right. By offloading the friction of the first draft to a machine, we risk offloading the learning process itself. Entry-level workers are incredibly vulnerable right now, not just because they might lose their jobs, but because the foundational work they rely on to build their long-term expertise is exactly what the machine does best.
And you can actually measure that panic. Survey after survey shows that over half of the global workforce right now is actively worried about what this technology means for their long-term future and their immediate livelihood.
The fear is highly measurable and entirely rational given the speed of adoption. We have never seen a tool adopted this fast.
Never.
But to understand the full picture, we also have to look at the historical precedent and the broader macroeconomic data. Major technological shifts historically reorganize labor. They do not simply delete it.
Reorganize it how?
This touches on something economists call the Jevons paradox. In the 19th century, William Stanley Jevons observed that as steam engines became more efficient at using coal consumption did not decrease, it actually exploded.
Because it became cheaper.
Exactly. Because energy became cheaper and more useful, people found entirely new ways to use it.
That makes sense. If coding becomes 50% faster, we don't fire half the software engineers. We just demand 10 times as much software.
We demand software for everything. Lowering the cost of a task and increasing the output usually creates massive new demand.
Demand for what exactly?
It creates a need for new oversight, new maintenance, new infrastructure, and entirely new services that were previously too expensive to even imagine.
I see.
Current macroeconomic projections suggest that while around 92 million roles could be displaced globally by 2030, something like 170 million new roles could be created.
170 million new roles.
Yes. On a spreadsheet, that is a massive net positive for humanity.
So what does this all mean? Because net job growth looks wonderful on a macroeconomic chart shown at a conference.
It certainly does.
But a newly created cybersecurity role, opening up in another city 3 years from now, doesn't do much for the administrative assistant who just had their daily scheduling tasks automated away today.
No, it does not.
The macro data feels almost insulting to the micro individual. How do we actually bridge that gap between their current reality and the supposed future of new jobs?
The gap between macroeconomic growth and individual reality is brutal, and we should not pretend otherwise. The friction of transition is where all the pain lives.
It is exhausting just thinking about it.
The fear is so high right now because the tools are not hidden in some distant server farm. They are visibly sitting on our screens, staring back at us. And this brings us to a phenomenon leaders are calling the capacity gap.
I want to focus on that, the capacity gap.
Yeah.
If these tools are making us 55% faster, why does everyone feel like they have absolutely no time? Why are we maxed out?
Because the baseline expectations of output are rising instantly.
The bar gets raised overnight.
Exactly. Businesses are pushing for extreme productivity. They see the tools, they see the promised efficiency, and they demand more output. But the humans are maxed out on time and cognitive energy.
Because reviewing the AI's work is still work.
Yes, reviewing and editing 10 AI-generated documents actually requires a different, often more exhausting type of cognitive load than writing one document from scratch.
That is so true.
When you write from scratch, you own the context. When you review machine output, you are constantly on high alert for hallucinations, logical leaps, and subtle errors. You are essentially doing QA work all day.
Which drains your brain in a totally different way.
Plus, there is a severe lack of honest, transparent guidance from employers about what this means for individual roles. People are being handed these tools without any updated job description. That uncertainty is emotionally exhausting.
It is paralyzing.
Timing and training matter immensely here. A newly created job in the future only helps you if you have the time, the resources, and the specific skills to transition into it today.
Which naturally pivots the conversation to what individuals can actively do right now. How do you ensure you are positioning yourself on the right side of this massive transition?
It is the most important question you can ask.
Because everywhere you look, people are desperately searching for courses or certifications that will give them AI-proof skills.
We need to dismantle the concept of AI-proof immediately. It is a false comfort.
There is no such thing.
There is no such thing as a totally AI-proof skill because the frontier of what the technology can do is expanding by the week. Seeking a fortress is the wrong strategy.
So what is the right strategy?
The actual goal is to develop complementary skills. You want to cultivate abilities that work in tandem with the technology skills that become significantly more valuable, not less, when routine output becomes cheap and infinite.
I hear people throwing around the term complementary skills, but it often sounds vague. If the machine is writing the code, drafting the emails, and summarizing the data, what is the actual bedrock we should be building our careers on? What do those specific skills look like in practice?
There are 5 crucial areas to focus on right now. The first is problem framing.
Problem framing, like knowing what to ask.
Exactly. Knowing what questions to ask. We're moving from a world where answers were scarce and expensive to a world where answers are instant and practically free.
Right.
When the machine can give you any answer instantly, the real value shifts entirely to knowing what question to ask in the first place. Large language models are designed to be helpful. They appease the prompt.
They just want to give you an answer, any answer.
Right. If you ask a flawed, poorly constructed question, the AI will confidently give you a perfectly executed, entirely useless answer. The value isn't in the execution anymore, it's in the architectural design of the prompt. You have to know what actually matters to the business.
That is a profound shift. We used to reward the person who could find the answer. Now we have to reward the person who can frame the problem correctly.
The second area is judgment. This is perhaps the most critical. You need the deep critical thinking required to spot nonsense, to catch hidden systemic biases, and to identify weak reasoning in what the software produces.
Because it does produce nonsense sometimes.
A lot of the time. AI systems do not possess ground truth. They do not know what is actually true in the physical world. They only know what words are statistically likely to follow other words.
That explains so much.
Therefore, their output often lacks an anchor to reality.
I see that constantly. The output looks incredibly confident, beautifully formatted, and grammatically perfect, even when it is entirely objectively wrong.
Which leads directly to the third area, domain knowledge. You cannot exercise judgment if you do not have expertise.
Right, you need to know the subject matter.
You need the actual hard-earned foundational knowledge of your field to know if the software's output is correct. Think of it like a pilot flying a commercial jet. The autopilot flies the plane 95% of the time. But if the sensors fail or an unprecedented weather event occurs, the pilot must know the fundamental physics of flying to take manual control and save the plane.
That makes perfect sense.
If you do not understand the fundamentals of marketing or coding or medicine, you cannot audit the machine's work. The danger right now is junior people using senior-level tools without the domain knowledge to catch the catastrophic errors.
That ties back to the missing bottom rungs of the ladder we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
If you don't do the grunt work, you don't build the domain knowledge, which means you lack the judgment to pilot the AI.
Exactly. They are all connected. The fourth area is communication and trust. Work still happens between human beings.
Thank goodness for that.
Even if a machine generates a perfect financial plan, a human client still needs to trust the person handing them that plan. Reassuring an anxious client whose retirement is on the line, reading the subtle mood of a boardroom during a pitch, navigating messy human conflict, these are no longer soft skills.
We really need a better term for soft skills.
We do, because the term diminishes them. They are the core competencies of the future. A machine cannot take the blame, a machine cannot share a risk, and a machine cannot look you in the eye and promise to fix a problem. We fundamentally crave human friction and human stakes.
That is incredibly true. We want to know another human is on the hook.
And finally, the fifth area is AI literacy itself. You need to know how to use these tools effectively as power tools without becoming intellectually lazy or over-dependent on them.
Knowing when to use them and when not to.
Yes, understanding their limitations, the context windows, their privacy implications, and how to steer them.
I love the idea of sitting down and doing a calm audit for workers. Just looking at your own daily tasks and brutally categorizing what is repetitive versus what requires human nuance and ownership.
The calm audit is a highly effective practical exercise. You have to actively figure out which parts of your day you should intentionally hand over to the tool so you can fiercely protect and improve upon the parts that require your humanity.
It is like moving from a manual handsaw to a high-powered electric saw. You do not get to turn your brain off just because the new tool cuts the wood 100 times faster.
You really don't.
In fact, you need much better judgment, much sharper focus, and a deeper understanding of the wood itself. Or you're going to make a much bigger, faster, and more catastrophic mistake.
That is a brilliant analogy. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate advantage goes to the person who can use the technology to expand their capabilities without ever letting it do the thinking for them.
Right.
It is about cognitive augmentation, not cognitive abdication. If you abdicate your thinking to the machine, you become obsolete. If you augment your thinking, you become invaluable.
That is a powerful distinction. So as we synthesize everything we have explored today, the conversation naturally winds down to this. The technology is not fundamentally about making human work irrelevant.
No, not at all.
It is stripping away the repetitive execution, and in doing so, it is fundamentally changing what counts as valuable human work.
It is forcing a global reevaluation of human capital. It is stripping away the easily digitized tasks, and it is forcing us to double down on the uniquely human elements of our roles: the complex judgment, the genuine empathy, the high-level strategy, the problem framing, and the interpersonal trust.
So tomorrow morning, when you sit down at your desk or start your shift, take a close analytical look at your very first task of the day. Ask yourself, is this the rough draft, the predictable pattern, the routine execution, or is this the final, nuanced human judgment?
That is the perfect question to ask.
And if it is the rough draft, how can you start strategically handing it off so you can focus all your energy on the part that actually requires you? Thanks for listening to TalkKast.